A startup or scale-up business, when they are looking for funding, they must be able to put on the hat of the entrepreneur. They must be able to communicate this to the investor that they are an entrepreneur. What happens is, by default, they end up putting on the cap of the proprietor, because that is what they are used to seeing in their lives. They rarely have exposure, face-to-face exposure with highly successful entrepreneurs. And the other problem is they are in the trenches, knee-deep in work, barely able to see beyond a few feet in front of them, and surviving on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis. So let us look at how they should project or portray themselves as an entrepreneur to an investor at every time, at all the times, and what is required, rather than just acting as though they're proprietor of the business. Firstly, the proprietor is usually someone who's just seeking a lifestyle business. Now, what that means is they just own a small business like a coffee shop, a hairdresser's, a restaurant, a removal company. Just a handful of people get together and they just try to make enough money to basically go on holiday a few times a year and provide for paying the rent of the business or the house they live in, and possibly send their kids to good school. That's about it as far as the ambitions go. However, the founder is a visionary and he has to be able to show that he can execute on his vision. No point in having a vision if you're not able to execute on it. And there's very few in number. While we see proprietors or small business owners everywhere, you just have to turn left, right and center or on any high street. It's full of small businesses. Most of the companies are made up of small businesses which employ 0 to 50 employees. Usually they're one-man band. They might have their family or kids helping them, or the friends. A very small group of people. While an entrepreneur has to build up a team starting from scratch, and they have to work in a team as well. And then as the company gets bigger, you end up with departments. You have an accounting department, PR department, media department, HR department. It gets much bigger. Point 3. The focus of the proprietors usually short to medium term. They're just trying to survive very, very short term. They are in the trenches and they just follow the same routine day in and day out. They get up at whatever, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. They work 6 days a week. They take 1 day off. They work 10 to 15 hours a day. That's the sort of norm of most proprietors. The entrepreneur has to think long term. When I talk of long term here, we are talking long term in the sense 10 years plus. How is the business going from a small one-man band or 2 or 3 people, co-founders, to becoming a company that will eventually employ, 1,000 plus employees in the country, around the world, internationally? 4. Usually the proprietor just thinks in terms of 1 or 2 shops or location of businesses. They do not have that vision, understanding, ability, knowledge, experience on how they're able to scale or expand. However, the entrepreneur has to think of how the business within a year, 2, 3 years is able to expand nationally and internationally across borders. So the proprietor is basically just looking at things very locally. Maybe if he has a shop in one part of a town, then you'll open a shop in another town nearby in another 10 years. So it grows very slowly. 5, market size and opportunity. The proprietor is usually always within a very overcrowded market, which is really small and stagnant. So, and it has a lot of tiny competitors like him. So we're looking like a restaurant owner who wants to open a restaurant for Italian food. Well, there's hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds or even thousands of people in any city. Or hairdresser, cutting men's hair or women's hair. Again, there's hundreds upon hundreds of people in any town or city doing exactly the same thing like him. So the market size and opportunity is very limited. However, the entrepreneur is looking for a market size that's large and growing. This word "and" is important. So at the moment, the market is not highly competitive because the possibility is that he's looking to a new market. A good example was, for example, driverless cars or space or renewable energy. They are large markets, or transportation, and they have potential to grow quite considerably in the future as well. And of course, there's also healthcare, for example, there's education. And finally, in terms of sales and profit, the proprietors, usually the sales tends to be very similar from one year to the next. So they would typically make £1 million, say, in a year. And within a year, it might grow by whatever 2%, 1 year to the next, just keeps growing by 2 or 3%. And typically, the profit would be just 10%. The net profit would be like 100,000. These are for the proprietors who are very good. Usually tends to be much lower than that. This is why the proprietor does not have profit to reinvest in the company or to expand, because it's so limited, the profit. And most of the profit actually goes into feeding the proprietors and his family's lifestyle. That's why it's called a lifestyle business. However, the entrepreneur, the sales and profits are in hundreds of millions, and the entrepreneur tends to take all that money and reinvest it in the company. And they also have a lot of their investment tied up in stocks and shares. So the conclusion is, when you're a startup founder and you're going to look for investment from an investor, do put on the hat of the entrepreneur and think and project yourself as being an experienced and professional entrepreneur.